Thank you, Mordecai. Thank you for your introduction and kind words. And I would like to thank the Susan Mendes Foundation, and particularly Olivia Mattis and Ella Andriessen, for giving me the opportunity to say something about the research I have done into the Noach file. I came to shocking revelations about the support the Dutch refugees received from the Dutch government in exile in London. If it had been up to the officials, anyone who made the dangerous journey to France would have been immediately sent back to the occupied Netherlands. The Engelandvaders were often asked by these representatives of the Dutch government, why did you leave Holland in the first place? And it is hard to believe nearly 80 years after liberation, but anyone who knocked on the door of the Dutch authorities in France around March 1942 received 500 French francs to return to the Netherlands. Anyone who wanted to travel onward to Spain and England, and thus to freedom, received nothing. There was also undeniable anti-Semitism. The Consul General of the Netherlands in France said, Jewish refugees are inferior. In 2022, I published my book about my father's story, Het Ongeloof, the Dutch title, and in English I translated it into Disbelief. I've done extensive research into the Noach file of the Dutch wartime government, and as mentioned, I found shocking information about the support the government provided the Dutch refugees. There was a sense of disbelief about my father's actions. Did it all happen? The evidence that it did happen was already widely available to the relevant authorities during the Second World War, which my book also confirms. But his actions were nevertheless still questions. I therefore choose the title Disbelief. Why did they not believe my father's actions? My father was one of the few who was openly critical of the operations of the Dutch government during the Second World War. He was not acknowledged for his actions. And we have a video clip coming up.
In het onbezette deel van Frankrijk, dat onbezet zou blijven tot 11 november 1942, bevonden zich duizenden gevluchte en gestrande, vaak wanhopige Nederlanders. De meeste hier in de stad Lyon, uiteraard illegaal. Hulp van officiële Nederlandse zijde werd niet of nauwelijks gegeven. Maar één man verrichtte wonderen, Noach.
As you've just heard, the reporter speaks plain language. Yet, during the war, my father was denounced as a liar, a notorious black marketer, and a charlatan in London, where Queen Wilhelmina and her government during the first days of the war had fled to. Why was he mulled in government circles? When my father reached Lyon in September 40, he contacted the Honorary Consul of the Netherlands. It was decided that he would act as a volunteer. My father, who was never officially appointed, never sworn in, and had absolutely no experience of consular or diplomatic work, only had his common sense to guide him. But he was strongly driven by his compassion for people in need and became an acting consul of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. His archive contains many letters written by the people he helped to escape. These letters are published on my website, salinoa.com. My father is also often mentioned in books and travel journals written by the Engelandvaders and the Jewish refugees. I quote from one of the many letters from the Engelandvaders who managed to escape thanks to my father. The man in question was waiting to be convicted of spying when my father rescued him from the hands of the Gestapo. And I quote, Mr. Noach, I owe my freedom and therefore my life to you. Eventually, also my father had to escape. He arrived in England on the 5th of December 1942 via Spain and Portugal. And there he was welcomed as a hero by the many Engelandvaders he had helped and who had also made it to London. They appointed him an honorary member of their Oranjehaven Club. And he was received by Queen Wilhelmina, who fled to England with her government at the outbreak of war in May 40. Somehow, a special relationship developed between my father and this queen, who was not known for drawing attention to the fate of the Jews in the Netherlands. During their first encounter, she asked him about his war experiences. However, she does not get the usual politically correct reply, as my father said, "Your Majesty, shall I first tell you a joke?" The ice was broken. As one historian writes, there was really only one Dutch Jew in London with whom Queen Wilhelmina had regular contact and whom she trusted completely. He trusted her, and she trusted him more than the many bootlickers and job hunters around her. A few authors believe that my father may not have been important, but he was influential. But according to the Dutch government, my father was no hero. He had written a highly critical report about the attitude of the Dutch governmental representative in France and Spain, and this report was not welcomed. His report, typed with narrow line spacing, covered 8.5 sheets of paper and had a huge impact. My father handed this report in person to the Queen, as she was the person who asked for it. A few days later, he was invited to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he was received by none other than the Minister of Foreign Affairs himself. It was not a particularly warm meeting because the minister felt excluded since the report covered matters relating to his ministry, but he had felt bypassed as it had been delivered directly to the Queen. And the atmosphere did not get any better when my father said, "Your Excellency, you're a public servant, a very high public servant. I'm a salesman. And when I want to sell something, I go straight to the director and not to an employee with a power of attorney." Two worlds collided. The world of the young Jewish salesman who found himself facing a ruthless enemy, and the world of the gentleman of the hyper-correct school of the Dutch consular and diplomatic service. When my father highlighted to the Dutch authorities that the enemy also does not comply with the rules, he was told that the Dutch are too decent for that. Later on, and as suggested by Queen Wilhelmina, my father submitted a claim for the expenses he had incurred. Eventually, he was told that he was supposed to take this claim to the War Office, where he was informed that he had not been instructed to do what he had seen fit to do. In response to this, my father told the Minister of Defense, "Your Excellency, you and I are in the same boat. I did it because there was no one else. There was no choice. If they had had more choice in London, they would have never appointed you to become minister." The relationship between my father and the Dutch government never recovered, neither then nor after the war. When Queen Wilhelmina wanted to honor my father for his marriage, the Dutch government prevented that. After all, awarding a royal honor mainly meant the recognition of his marriage, but also the acknowledgement of the objections he reported involving a number of senior officials of the Foreign Affairs. And I will give an example what I found in the National Archives. The chairman of the Dutch Red Cross Society wrote in a letter that what was attributed to my father was not true at all. All Sally Noach had done was collecting Dutch people whose liberation had been brought about by others. On screen now, you see a list of men, women and children my father helped during his stay in London and surrounding area. This list is still not complete, but it gives a good idea of the number of people he helped in various ways on their way to freedom during September 40, September 42. Either by releasing them from the camps or prisons, welcoming them into his home, feeding them, and or providing them with money, advice, and travel documents. And in the next clip, we will see on December 28, 1969, on December 28, 1969, and that was his 60th birthday, my father finally received a royal honor. He was given the Cross of Honor of the Order of the House of Orange. Awarding this was a completely personal matter for the head of the House of Orange. My father received the Cross of Honor from Queen Juliana and Prince Bernhard, whilst the government completely disregarded him. The documentary you have seen about the life of my father came about entirely because of the initiatives of my younger sister Irene, from idea to financing. And dear sister, I know you're attending the event. I'm very grateful to you for doing that. I got the idea of naming a park in Israel after my father and contacted the Jewish National Fund, the institution involved in planting trees and creating forests in Israel. They were immediately enthusiastic and ensured for this initiative to become a reality. The festive opening ceremony took place on Thursday, the 2nd of May 2019, so 4 years ago. Yom HaShoah it was. And Yom HaShoah is not only a memorial for the countless people who disappeared in the deep darkness of the Shoah, but it is also a tribute to the heroes. And I spoke about this connection at the opening of the Lyon Park in Haifa. And we have a video clip for that.
Call it Yom HaShoah, the Day of Destruction. The full name, however, is Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, Holocaust, Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance. Hagvura. Hagvura incorporates the stem of Gibor, which means hero. Our father, Noach, was one such hero.
And through my research, I have learned what really happened during the time of my father's actions, much more than he has ever been aware of during his lifetime. I have discovered things my father never got to find out. It has given me a disturbing picture. He often said, an award won't feed us. He was promised to receive a high honor, but it was prevented by the government. If the government had acknowledged his actions, they would have acknowledged that they were wrong. My father's response, the people I saved have all received an honor. I have received my award through theirs. By doing my own research, I can now see it all in a different light. I now know exactly what happened to my father. I never questioned his story, and my research has only confirmed his story, which made me writing a book much easier. Now I can look at it more impartial. I now have documented evidence that his story was correct. I like to end by saying that I dedicated my book to my father's 7 grandchildren, and written in my book my advice to them to let their grandfather's actions be guidance for all their thoughts and actions. And the opening in my book starts with the following statement from the Talmud. He who saves one life saves a whole world. A beautiful Jewish expression. Thank you very much for your time and giving me this platform to talk about my father. Thank you, Matthew and Valentin, for your excellent technical support. And let me now introduce my good old friend, Herman Feder, who, along with his family, has been rescued by my father. Thank you. I have some final thoughts, and I would like to say that my father was the living example of so many Jews who fought the enemy in spite of the very strange position in which they found themselves. And my father, Salino, was one of the people who stood up and who crossed the fear barrier. And I don't think that the post-war generations will ever be able to comprehend the full extent of what those who resisted, like my father and many others, meant to their fellow men. But what we can do is express our intense gratitude to them because they had the courage to resist. And we need to promise one another to remain vigilant so that what happened can never happen again. But these last words we say too often and too much, and unfortunately it happens again every day. Thank you very much for your attention.